What's up, y'all? Today I'm going to be doing a video all about expenses, and this is my #1 money saving tip that has helped me for many years. So like always, I really hope you guys find some value out of this, and if you guys aren't personally struggling with just financial insecurity, maybe just share this with somebody that is, and hopefully it's just gonna help make the world go round. Not like my duties here on YouTube with my 100-something viewers are gonna make the world go round, but yeah, you get the point. So I kind of just want to introduce a funny story of how even me stumbling upon doing an expense sheet even started in the first place. And it all started when I was spending a whole summer in SF doing an internship. It was really my first time being independent and away from my family for an extended period of time. I go to college here, but it's pretty local, so it didn't really feel like I was really far apart from my family. But being in SF, being a whole 8 hours away, really felt like I was away. So me being what I thought is the big girl that I am and the mature thing to do is I created an expense sheet. I remember distinctly thinking I was so smart, I was so responsible, so mature for doing this expense sheet. So I showed my parents of just everything that I've been spending, hoping that it'd be like, hey, look at your daughter, so mature. The first thing that my dad responded back with when I showed him was, and I quote, "You'd save more money if you spent less on coffee and boba." Okay, so he doesn't actually sound like that. And my smartass remark was, and I quote, "Buying coffee gets me through the workday, and if I can get through the workday, that's a whole day's worth of income versus a $3 cup of coffee." But then I thought, you know, your parents are always right. And I did think, how much do I actually spend on coffee? So that's kind of just a little story or anecdote of how I got to this point where I started using an expense sheet and taking it seriously and finding value in just how it has helped me save a bunch of money. Finances is a really touchy subject and not a lot of people want to approach it, but I think something that has helped me just get through this is just an awareness. Step 1 is tally it up. I know this is not something you want to hear, and I know it's a dreaded, daunting task, but really, open up your expense sheet, or if you don't have an expense sheet, open up your bank account and look at stuff that you're spending your money on that is not really an essential item. So for mine, like I said in the anecdote, it was coffee. So what I did immediately after is I opened up my 3 months of just what I spent in SF and highlighted and tallied up all the things that had to do with beverages. And Excel makes it really easy for you to just use the sum function and just press all of the beverage expenses and then it totals it up for you. This is a crucial step because visualizing it is so important. I feel like people don't really let it register and let it click until they see it just on paper and they see how much they're spending on coffee or whatever non-essential item or whatever item that you're struggling to save for. All I have to say from this step 1 is that it's really just about committing and being aware and visualizing it and just accepting it. Which brings me to my next step. Step 2, be the number. I know just this sounds really dumb, but look at that number that you totaled up from step 1 and just accept it. Soak it in. Listen to it. I dedicated a whole step just to this because I find it really important in just the healing process of just not denying it and in turn accepting it and letting your mentality be one of, okay, well now I see the lump sum total amount and what am I gonna do about it? Just that awareness, and if you're aware of it, you know, do something about it. Step 3 is to create your Excel sheet. Now I made a very simple, straightforward format of how I set up my Excel sheet. Something I really suggest when doing this step is make it as easy as possible. When I use Excel, I don't do the nooks and crannies of using like standard deviation or finding the mean. Not like I don't think you would need to do that for an expense sheet, but I keep it simple. I just keep it to using the sum function. And I think that just purely as it is, the easier it is to use, the more inclined you will actually use it. I separate mine into different months, and I do this purely because I think that seeing just your expenses from a whole year in just a list format, a long form format, can seem very overwhelming. So if you just split it up into months, and how I do is I split it up into quarters. So like, for example, my summer expenses, my spring expenses, my fall expenses, and my winter expenses. By just setting it up into separate months, it makes it a lot more easier to digest and less intimidating and daunting to look at. From there, I separate it into recreational / funsy purposes and then necessities. And there's really no rhyme or reason as to why I separate it into these two sections, but it just makes me feel better knowing that if I have a huge lump sum of my expenses that month going towards rent, that'll funnel into the necessity section, and it just makes me feel better because it's stuff that I know I have to pay for and it's not stuff that I'm just blowing off money on. You know, necessities are stuff that's like rent, utilities, or textbooks, things that you really can't avoid that are pretty much recurring, monthly recurring expenses. But on the other hand, there's the funsy expenses. So it's, you know, your trips to the club, you know, drinks, eating out, shopping. It's that midnight purchase that you shouldn't have done, but you did it. So put that into your funsy expense sheet. And then to top it off, I also have a separate column that's just strictly for income. So I guess that's kind of like the overarching umbrella term that I call it. Income, or pretty much just anything I made from that month. So it'll have all my paychecks for my jobs, or it'll have stuff if I sold it on eBay, if I sold something on Poshmark, I'll also include that into the income area. Or let's just say I got a birthday present of money, I'll also include that into my income. From that, I have this sum total of basically my monthly expenses totaled up, then my monthly savings totaled up, my monthly income, and you guys get the gist. Basically how I calculate my savings is I started this in September, so fall quarter. I'll start it from fall quarter, take that quarter savings, and then carry that over to quarter 2, then quarter 3, then quarter 4. Just so that I have kind of like a tally of how much I'm actually saving across all these months. Step 4 is the why I do this. And I think this is really important to note and to understand the why to do an expense sheet. The why you do an expense sheet. Back in SF, I had so many car troubles, and these are things that you just can't predict. These are unforeseeable things, but it's nice to know that you have a savings that if anything were to happen to your car, if you were to get fined, that you would have a comfortable amount of savings to cover it. So my personal example is my car got broken into, and that's something that I couldn't have predicted, but I wasn't too scared about it because I knew that I had the money to get the window repair. So this is why it's really crucial you keep a really keen eye on your expense sheet and just to know kind of the ballpark estimate of how much you have in your savings, because when things like this happen, you don't have to stress out too much. So the second why as to why I created an expense sheet was just to see how much money I was spending on non-essential items. So in my case, it was coffee. So I did what I only had to do, and I cut out caffeine. Psych, I would never do that. Instead, I created a very easy solution and just decided to make my own coffee at home. So now I'm gonna go into a segment that I thought was really cool, but none of you guys asked for it, but I still thought it was cool. So here it goes. I calculated that in an average week, I used to buy coffee out 3 to 4 times a week. And each cup of coffee could range from $3 to $5. Obviously, if you're getting black coffee, probably $3. If you're getting a latte, probably $5, upwards to even $6. So on average, in a week, I would spend between $12 to $16 on coffee, which means in a month, that was about $48 to $64 on coffee. And y'all get the gist. That means in a whole year, I would spend around $576 to $678 on a beverage. A liquid, essentially beans soaked in water. Ever since I started making coffee at home, I now buy a bag of beans every month and a half around. And I usually make coffee six out of 7 days of the week. So with each bag of coffee, I can make around 36 cups of coffee. So each bag typically costs $13 to $14 for me. So for the price of 2.5 lattes, so 2.5 lattes is probably like maybe $15, I can get a whole bag of beans, which is 36 cups of coffee. So if that didn't sell you enough. So for the grand finale, in a year I spend $104 on coffee beans, which is 7 times less than how much I usually would spend buying coffee out. So in conclusion, this is not to say that you have to be a crazy stickler about your money and extremely frugal and never go treat yourself. I'm not trying to say that at all. I just think that a step to more financial freedom and less financial insecurity is just awareness and visualization of what you're actually spending your money on. So I really advise you, don't be afraid to open up your bank account, or maybe even try doing an expense sheet of your own. What's nice about just doing an expense sheet is I have found that when I treat people out, it's so much more rewarding now. In the past, when I would treat people out, I'd be like, do I have to? Should I? Maybe I shouldn't. But now, because I know I have a good sum of money in savings, it feels so much rewarding to treat somebody out because you know that you have the money to do that. And once again, this can just apply to anything. Let's say you're trying to save for a trip at the end of the year, and maybe you cut out coffee too. By the end of 3 months, you probably already have $400 saved that can go towards your travel fund. Or maybe you're not a coffee drinker and maybe you eat out a lot instead. Do an expense sheet and highlight all the times you ate out. And maybe instead just get groceries and see how much money you're saving by cooking at home. And not only that, you're cooking probably healthier meals and you're building better habits. So I just want to outro this video by once again sharing that if you are financially struggling or if you feel like you're stuck in a rut, I really advise you to visualize it and put it and budget it into an expense sheet. Just because the physical act of writing things in makes you more aware, and maybe it's just even in your subconscious. It's not limiting your spending, but being more wise about where you're putting your money into. If you guys have found this video personally helpful, or you know that somebody is financially struggling and maybe, you know, could use a bit of advice from, you know, your friendly neighbor or your friendly girl next door, then send them this video. I truly hope that the videos that I'm creating for you guys are giving you guys some sort of value, as I always say. So thank you guys so much for tuning and just tagging along, and I hope you guys found this video interesting and helpful. So I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!